Morning, everyone. We are getting ready to read chapters 15 and 16 in Dolls of War. I am so excited to see what happens next, so stay with me. When sugar rationing began in May, Macy walked with Miss Rasmussen to the school gymnasium to stand in line with many other people. It's part of the war effort, a woman in front of them said. This is the least we can do for our brave soldiers. Remember, rationing means they're cutting down. So remember how they cut down on rubber and they didn't have erasers. Now they're cutting down on sugar. Macy agreed. She would stand in line all day and all night if it would help Nick and Hap. I won't use sugar on my oatmeal anymore, she told Miss Rasmussen. Then we can save enough coupons to buy sugar to make fudge for Nick. That's a generous idea, the housekeeper said with a smile. But we can't save stamps. We have to use them every month and throw away any we have extra. From across the gym, a woman called, Sally Ann Rasmussen. A blonde woman hurried toward them. I haven't seen you since high school. They hugged. Then Miss Rasmussen stepped back, smiling. It's been 3 years since I graduated. You were 2 years behind me, and you look prettier than you did then, Patty. The other woman's eyes sparkled. That's because I'm excited. I'm going to Seattle. I'll help build airplanes in the Boeing plant and make heaps of money. Seattle? You were going to study to be a teacher. What does your father say? Oh, you know fathers. They get grumpy when they don't get what they want. Patty winked at Macy. I'll bet you're one of his students. I should be careful what I say. My teacher is Miss Stewart, Macy said, confused. Miss Rasmussen explained. Patricia, is Principal Bates's daughter, honey. She turned back to her friend. Isn't this idea kind of sudden? Who has time for long debate? Say, why don't you come with me? We can be roommates. Put away money for our old age. Maybe meet the men of our dreams. Miss Rasmussen shook her head. The men of our dreams are all fighting in the war. But they go on leave. We can help out at the USO when we're off work. We'll serve the boys coffee and donuts and maybe share a dance. Come with me, Sally Ann. It will be swell. Macy saw temptation in Miss Rasmussen's face. Was she really thinking of leaving them to go work in the Boeing plant and dance with soldiers and sailors? She tugged the housekeeper's hand. Papa and I need you here. Miss Rasmussen seemed to shake the dreaminess from her expression. The ration sign-up line was moving forward. That's not for me, she told her friend. Clasping Macy's hand, she stepped forward with the line. Think about it, Patty said before leaving to join friends across the room. I'll do that much, Miss Rasmussen called after her, making Macy feel cold inside. I might not be able to think of anything else. In early June, Macy sat beside Miss Tokyo, writing a note to Mama in her Christmas journal. Miss Rasmussen didn't go to Seattle with Principal Bates's daughter, but she left us anyway. You'd be surprised, Mama. All around the country, women are signing up with the WAAC. That's the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. Last week, Miss Rasmussen joined. When she left, she said she'll miss us, but she wants to serve our country, even if they only allow WAACs to do paperwork. Papa says maybe she'll meet somebody nice and come back married. Luke doesn't like that idea, but we're all proud of her for helping the war effort. We'll really miss her, though. Macy closed the journal and hurried to the kitchen to help Papa with dinner. It didn't take long. Their meals were simpler now without Miss Rasmussen. Neighbors sometimes brought extra servings from their own meals, and that helped. When they'd finished, Macy carried their dishes to the sink, then turned to study the big map on the wall. Papa was listening to the radio and moving map pins around. He hadn't yet noticed the blue pin for Nick's ship safe in a cove off New Zealand. Macy ran water into the sink for the dishes, smiling as she waited for Papa to notice the blue pin. The news switched to a commentator whose voice rose a little as he reported. A military man says that death and destruction may come down from American skies at any moment. When Macy gasped, Papa turned the radio down. Don't believe all these reporters, Macy. Some of them think they need to scare people, so we'll support the war effort. She shivered. We're already supporting the war as much as we can. They have Nick and Hap, and now they have Miss Rasmussen. The radio commentator's words made fear almost crush her. She had learned to push it back most of the time, but not always. Leaving the dishes to soak, she rushed across to the museum and Miss Tokyo. She knelt beside the doll's stand and looked into her gentle face. Is Mama listening, Miss Tokyo? Yes, Macy-chan, the doll said in her high voice. Mama always listens to you. Please tell her I'm so scared for Nick. So is Papa. She drew in a deep, shaky breath and spoke straight to her mother. We're trying to be brave without you, Mama, even though it hurts. Macy bit her lip and waited a moment until she trusted her voice again. We just can't lose Nick, too. So if the angels tell you Nick will be with you soon, please tell them we need him here. Ask them to please give him more time. Let him come home to us after the war. Papa sat at the breakfast table one morning when school had let out for the summer and turned on the radio. We're not getting a lot of museum visitors these days. With gas rationing and the risk of wearing out their tires, people are staying home more. Macy poured the coffee she had made just the way Miss Rasmussen did and carefully carried the cup to him. Will the museum have to close? He sipped the coffee and nodded approval. Not right away, but fewer visitors will give us time to do a better job of polishing floors and dusting exhibits. There will be a small salary for you if you're willing to help. Of course I'll help. She would help without a salary just to work with Papa, but it would be nice to have spending money. Busy days passed quickly, she found. It was mid-July before she had time to sit beside Miss Tokyo and write a quick letter to Mama. It's been fun working with Papa. Everyone in town seems nicer this summer. Maybe they aren't mad at Miss Tokyo anymore. Maybe they aren't mad at me. She hoped that feeling would last, especially when school began again in the fall. After Labor Day in September, she used a lot of exclamation marks in her note to Mama. School started again. I'm in 6th grade. We're still at war, though, so it's still scary. The littlest kids have to hide under their desks when the siren blows. They hope the desks will protect them if bombs fall. Older students are supposed to run to nearby homes when the siren blows. I hope I get assigned to a family that likes to play Monopoly so we won't have to think about bombs. We haven't heard from Nick for a while. Maybe I should stop moving the pin for his ship around. I don't think he gets near land long enough for the crew to send the mail. She didn't tell Mama that the hope for friendlier feelings hadn't lasted. Mark and Rachel had begun saying mean things about Miss Tokyo again. Macy didn't write those things to Mama. She didn't want to say them in front of the doll. She did tell Mama about the evil Axis. That's what they call our enemies, Japan, Germany, and Italy. Christopher Adams got so mad at news about Adolf Hitler that he threw his mother's German Nutcracker man in the trash. His mother made him dig them out and scrub them, but she stored the nutcrackers away until after the war. When Christopher told the class about it, he stared straight at me, as if he expected me to stand up and say we were putting the Japanese doll in storage. I guess he's been listening to Mark and Rachel. I don't care what any of them think. Miss Tokyo is my friend. Macy sat with Lily on their favorite bench outside the schoolroom with their lunch bags on a windy day. Macy smoothed the letter from Nick on her knees, trying to keep the wind from catching it. The paper he uses is so thin I can almost see through it. Airmail paper, Lily agreed. And look, Macy said, one side of the paper is the letter. Then he folds all the sides in and writes the address on the back so it turns into its own envelope. That way it doesn't weigh much and the mailbags can carry lots more letters to families. If you don't know where he is, how can you write back to him? Lily asked. He uses an FPO address. That means Fleet Post Office. The people there know where to send it. She looked up as Christopher walked over. A letter from your brother? He asked. Yes. Macy spread Nick's letter on her lap, careful to keep it safe from the wind. He can't say anything about where he is, but he loves the feel of the waves. She stopped. The censors used a black pen to cover whatever he said next. She grinned. I'll bet he said he almost never gets seasick. When we lived at the coast and he went fishing on trawlers, he always bragged about that. Why would the censors care? They're very careful, Lily said. My father was upset when they canceled his favorite radio program, the one with interviews with the man in the street. But he said he'll agree with anything that keeps our boys safe, and an interviewed man in the street could easily be a spy using the radio program to send coded information to our enemies. They're even censoring weather reports, Christopher agreed. The radio can't mention rain or snow or fog or even sunshine because it might help the enemy. He watched Macy smoothing Nick's letter on her lap. You've had a letter from your brother every day this week. You're lucky. He thinks about us a lot. Lily sighed loudly. It's the same letter. She brings it every day and pretends she just got it. Lily was her best friend, but honesty might as well have been her middle name. Macy could only bite back tears and say, You don't know everything. I know that's the same letter, Lily said. Christopher broke in. I'll bet he does write every day, but the mail doesn't get off the ship that often. You'll probably get a bunch of letters all at once. From across the schoolyard, Rachel called, Christopher, do you want to hear something funny Mark just said? Macy looked after Christopher as he walked away. Could it be true? Would a bunch of letters be coming from Nick? That had to be what was happening, and she was going to answer every letter one at a time. She turned to ask Lily if she thought the letters could be numbered in case Nick got them in the wrong order. Lily was watching Christopher join his friends. Rachel's right. He does like you. What? Who, Christopher? No, he doesn't. But he had given her hope about Nick, and today she couldn't even resent Rachel. In October, dried leaves crunched beneath Macy's shoes when she walked home from school to share good news with her mother. She went straight into the museum and over to Miss Tokyo and pulled the Christmas journal from under the doll's stand where she kept it. Guess what, Mama? She wrote, we collected lots of scrap iron and tin over the summer. The school set up a collection in September, and Principal Bates announced a contest. The class that collects the most scrap before Christmas break will win a trip to the skating rink in Junction City. Rachel's already teasing the boys about skating with her. She promised to teach Lily to dance on skates. I don't care. I just want to go skating. I hope our class wins. Mom, Macy couldn't understand why Lily wanted to be with popular, flirty Rachel. She told herself she didn't care. Every day for 2 weeks, when Macy walked home from school, she slid her shoes along the pavement, pretending to be wearing roller skates and practicing moves. Thinking that Nick and Hap would laugh at that, she glanced at Hap's house as she passed. His mother stood in the big front window, placing a gold star flag against the glass. The air whooshed out of Macy's chest. She clutched the pickets in the fence. That didn't mean... It couldn't mean... No! She should ask. She didn't want to ask. Asking might make it true. And it couldn't be true. She was scarcely aware of Mark crossing the street until he stood close to her and asked, What do you think of your Jap friends now? What? She asked, too numb to think. Your friends, he repeated, sounding even meaner than usual. Your Jap friends, you know, the ones fighting our boys on Guadalcanal. They killed Hap. She stared at him. In her head, she understood what he just said. In her heart, his words didn't make sense. No, she said. No! Yes, one of their sneaky crew threw a grenade. Hap dived on it to protect his friends. It ripped out his guts. Macy dropped to her knees, leaning into the nearby weeds to throw up until nothing was left inside her. Grief swelled through her chest. There was no room left for air. Gasping and clutching the pickets for support, she struggled to her feet. To her own ears, her whimpers sounded like a small wounded animal. I guess that makes Hap a hero, Mark said in the same nasty voice. I say it makes him stupid. I'll bet his friends all ducked out of the way. Macy had room for another emotion after all. Hot anger blazed through her. Without thinking, she reached for one of the decorative rocks under the pickets. What are you going to do with that? Mark asked. You going to hit me? Macy straightened up. I'm going to knock your lying teeth out of your mouth. As she swung her arm back, the house door opened, revealing one of Hap's neighbors. Children, the woman called. Play somewhere else, please. We need quiet. The interruption gave Macy time to think. Mark wasn't worth the trouble she'd been about to bring on herself. She let the rock fall. Get rid of that doll, Mark said, and walked away. Macy looked at the woman on the porch. Should she ask if what Mark had said was true? No. The gold flag and request for quiet told her all she needed to know. Tears welled through her. Turning, she ran for home. She had to talk to Miss Tokyo and Mama. She veered into the museum, shoving past the heavy front doors. Her father stood quickly from behind his desk. Macy cried. They killed Hap! She ran down the hall to the doll and fell sobbing to her knees. Mama, she said between sobs, I can't grow up and marry Hap. The war killed him. She raised her head to look at the doll. The gentle eyes looked sad. Instead of an almost smile, her lips looked as if she were about to speak, but she was silent. Hap loved you, Macy told Miss Tokyo. He knew the war wasn't your fault. Her voice broke, and she lowered her head to her arms on the doll's stand. Beneath grief, deep fear hovered, no matter how she tried to push it down. If Hap had been killed, what was happening to Nick? Despite her love for Miss Tokyo, she hated the generals who had caused the war that killed Hap and was killing a lot of other men. Who might kill Nick? No! She would not even think that. Despair boiled through her. Mama's book held beautiful pictures of shrines and flowers and pretty ladies in kimonos. But men from Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. They were killing men on islands in the South Pacific and on ships in the waters around them. Grief for Hap wrenched her. Again, she pushed back the fear that Nick could be killed too. Her thoughts spun until they made her dizzy. Her father's strong arms lifted her into his lap. He held her, not talking but stroking her back and hair, comforting her in silence while anguish tore away her thoughts. Finally, she curled close with her head on his shoulder. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "I know," he said. "We all are." Standing, he carried her from the museum and back to their kitchen. While she slumped on a chair, wiping tears from her face with a kitchen towel, he made hot chocolate for both of them and added a few hard-to-find marshmallows. Without speaking, they watched their marshmallows melt into the chocolate. When Macy stood to locate Nick's blue-topped map pin and place it in the safety of San Francisco Bay, Papa didn't protest. That was such a sad chapter. Chapter 16 is very short, okay, so we're going to read that too. 3 men came in when Papa opened the museum on Saturday morning. Their message was clear before a word was spoken. Neighbors, Macy thought, and yet today they were strangers. She stepped backward, closer to Papa. The men's eyes were cold. Their mouths were set in dangerous lines. She had never seen them like this. She wanted to run, but was afraid to move. Mr. Broward stepped forward. Before the war, he had been a cheerful man behind the butcher's block who picked out special cuts for Miss Rasmussen. He was clearly in charge of the group, but there was no doubt that all the men were set on a single purpose. Mr. Amos from the gas station put it into words. "We're here for that Jap doll, James. Step aside." Mr. Bradford had been with the first group months ago. The grocer had changed from the kind man she had known all her life. This was what war did, made strangers out of friends, even when battles weren't being fought in your town. "That doll stands for people who are killing our boys," he said. "Hap Davis defended the doll, and look what happened. The Japs killed him. Words all over town." The pain of Hap's death struck Macy as if new to her. The gold star in his family's window seared her memory. She'd been too shocked by her own grief to realize that anger was building in others. "Everyone is torn up over losing Hap," Mr. Broward said, breaking into Macy's thoughts. "We want to see somebody pay, here and now. The Jap doll will do. A bunch of folks are building a bonfire in front of the courthouse." Did they mean to burn Miss Tokyo? Macy looked to Papa for help. His eyes were hard and angry, but he said nothing. She thought he must have said it all the time, She thought he must have said it all the last time men came, but then they'd only wanted to put Miss Tokyo in storage. "Her kind isn't wanted here," Mr. Amos said. "She'll burn. For Hap." Papa wrapped one arm around Macy, pulling her to his side. She realized she had taken a step forward without thinking. Papa's hold told her it was too late. He said to the men, "Burning the doll won't help Hap." "We formed a committee," Mr. Bradford said. "We're set on keeping our city safe." "This doll is no danger to this city," Papa said. "Neither is the museum." Macy looked from one to another of the men. None looked willing to listen or reason. She knotted her hands into fists so tight her nails dented her palms. "That Jap doll puts us all at risk," Mr. Broward said, his eyes looking even harder. "She probably has a secret radio inside," Mr. Amos snapped. "She's probably radioing the Jap fleet right now." He glanced around, as if expecting enemy soldiers to smash through the Stanby's doors. Papa said, "I think you know how foolish that sounds. If you're looking for a reason to destroy city property, you'll have to do better." Mr. Bradford asked, "Is the museum's safety reason enough for you? The longer that Jap doll stands here, the more riled up people get." Mr. Amos cut in. "Hap Davis getting killed is all it took. There's talk of burning the whole blasted Stanby to the ground." Macy felt Papa stiffen. She clutched his sleeve. "Papa!" "Go to the house," he said without looking at her. "See to supper. I'll take care of this." "There is nothing to take care of," Mr. Broward said, "except for you stepping out of our way." Macy looked toward the room with Miss Tokyo, frantic to get to her. Papa gripped her shoulder, turning her toward the back door. Despairing, she looked up at him. "Papa!" "Go home, Macy," he said. "Now." He'd used her name, but it made her feel worse, not better. He was going to let them take the doll and didn't want her to see it. She knew he couldn't fight them all, and maybe even the whole town. But Miss Tokyo was her friend. In Macy's heart, Miss Tokyo held part of Mama. Papa felt that way too. "Go," Papa said again, sounding as hard as the men. There was no choice. She rushed down a hall past the stairs to the storage room and out the back door. A light rain was falling. She scarcely felt it. A storm raged inside her head. When she reached the steps to the houses, voices made her turn and look back. The three men were leaving. Mr. Broward had Miss Tokyo over his shoulder as he might carry a slab of beef. The long end of the doll's obi whipped in the wind. Macy clamped one hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Her heart slammed so hard in her chest her ribs hurt. She had to run after them, to stop them somehow. What could she do? Grabbing the banister, she forced herself one step at a time up the stairs, away from the men taking Miss Tokyo to be burned. As if a rubber band had released her, she rushed into the house and up to her room. Anguished tears streamed down her cheeks. She flung herself face down on the bed. I loved Hap too, she said with a sob. I was going to grow up and marry him, and now I can't, because he's dead. But that doesn't make me want to burn down the museum. She reached across the bed to her nightstand and the valentine from Hap. For a moment, she pressed it close, as she had done countless times before. She pictured Hap's carefree grin and the kindness in his eyes. I loved him, she whispered. I really, really did. I don't care if I am only 11. She could almost hear Papa calling her foolish. Everyone would think that. It was why she had never shared the valentine with Papa or anyone else. She opened the card and read the words she had memorized long ago. Then she looked at them again, really looked at them. Possibilities raced through her head so fast they made her dizzy. The men would make speeches before they burned Miss Tokyo. Mr. Amos loved to make speeches, and he'd want a good crowd gathered while the bonfire blazed higher. Maybe they hadn't even lit it yet. Maybe people were still bringing wood while Mr. Amos excited them with their speech. Urgency drove to her feet. They'll listen to you, Hap. They'll have to. Clutching the valentine in one hand, she scrambled from the bed and raced for the stairs. What a long, sad 2 chapters. Thank you for sticking with me. Looking forward to tomorrow for the next 2 chapters. See ya.